Okay, you guys, I got something here that I developed which is called the Circles of Combat. And basically, it was a piece of paper, and what I did is I drew circles. Like, for instance, you got a circle here, and then outside of here would be a circle also. And what I did is I incorporated the Circles of Combat with things like the Tooler's Drill, for instance, which is 7 yards. And what this is a person that's unarmed can charge you and hurt you or kill you within 1.5 seconds, charging from 7 yards. And the reason why the Tooler's Drill was invented is because they wanted to know if an officer, if he was charged, how fast could he get his weapon out and draw and make a good shot placement within that distance. So I have a video on Tooler's Drill that goes more into depth, but I want to focus on the circles for now. And then maybe sometime later I'll explain how to incorporate Tooler's Drill into this. But I will have some examples. So on this chart, if you look right here, these numbers on the bottom all represent feet. So we got 0 right here going out to 30 feet. Okay. This right here is yardage. We got 3 yards here. We got 5 yards here, 7 yards, 10 yards. These numbers right here are the Tooler's Drill numbers. For example, the average person can run 7 yards in 1.5 seconds, which means that they can run 10 yards in 2.25 seconds, which means they can run 3 yards at a quarter of a second. And that's important to incorporate into the Circles of Combat. So I'm just giving you an example of 3 circles right now. I have an advanced chart that I made that really gets into detail for different situations for both armed, unarmed, and in buildings and different things like that. So I want you to focus pretty much on this right here for now. This right here, this first circle represents yourself, your personal space, which is 1 yard. That's considered personal space. When you're standing in the checkout line, anytime somebody closes that distance of a yard, you feel uncomfortable because you feel like they're right up on you. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So here's the person that's standing in the checkout line, and they're really close to you, but they're within arms and legs distance, which means that this first circle of combat here, since they're right up on you, you're probably going to have to use kicks and punches. Now, it's not to say that you can't use a knife or a gun, but what I'm saying is to clear distance, you might have to go hand to hand. So what I've done is I've labeled distance number 1, hand-to-hand combat. And if you clear the distance and you have more distance, then you can do other things. So it's not to say that you can't use a gun or a knife, but we're just being realistic here about the distances and about how fast you are doing things. So we could say that once a person's past your personal space where they can't throw a kick or a punch, then within this zone somewhere here, a knife would be good. And the same thing with a knife is you're clearing some distance so that eventually you can get to your gun. And why do we put the gun out here? Because you would have to draw your gun within this distance right here, a quarter of a second, for instance, right here, you'd have to draw your gun. And then this distance here, you'd have to draw your gun within 1.5 seconds. So what we're saying is that when you're real close to somebody in personal space where they can reach you and grab you, that there might be a chance where you can't grab your knife or you can't grab your gun, okay? Once you're past 1 yard, there might be a thing where you can use hand-to-hand, but maybe preferring your knife because you have enough time to grab your knife and to use it there, but not enough time to grab your gun that's holstered in your waistband. because your hands are going to be down grabbing for that gun. So once we get out here, if the person's out here and they have an intent of harming you or killing you, and I'm just speaking about open hands right now, an unarmed person pretty much, because it's a whole different thing with a person that has a knife, a stick of some kind, or some other object, and then also it's another thing if a person has a gun. So we have to take it by weapon of the attacker. We have to take it in steps. So what we're talking about here is just an unarmed person that wishes to harm you or kill you from this distance. And this distance is where law enforcement comes in, because this is Dennis Tooler's drill here, the 7-yard, 1.5-second charge, where a person could get to the officer or somebody like you, disarm you or struggle for the gun, sometimes before you can even draw. Now, if you have space, you can retreat and put more space between you and him so you can draw. But what happens with law enforcement specifically, more than us citizens, is that they're up against some kind of a building or inside of a home or something like that, and they can't retreat. They have nowhere to go. So it's more difficult for them. So this is why the Tooler's drill, even though you could, out in an open area, make a break for it, sometimes you can't. So the Tooler's drill is based on this person here wants to harm the officer. He can cover 7 yards in 1.5 seconds. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the Tooler's drill. So once again, we're talking unarmed right here. So, and the other thing I wanted to say is yes, at closer distances of these circles, number 1 and 2, you could use one of these 3. That's true. But you have to react very quickly, because tenths of a second matter in this distance right here. So you have to get a mindset that if you're standing in a checkout line and somebody's within your personal space, at that moment you have to prepare yourself of what you would do if they would attack you. And my first step would be kicks and punches that I've learned in the martial arts, just the basics. And I would use that first. And then if the person was out of my first combat circle zone right here, then I know I can go for the knife, because I have the distance to reach and go for the knife. But I know that I probably won't be able to unholster my weapon and draw within 3/4 of a second. That's a very, very quick draw. Especially in an adrenaline rush situation, you're not going to do as good as you are in the range. So don't kid yourself. All this happens so fast. So once again, the hand-to-hand combat is just to get a little space between you and him so that you can grab the knife, okay, within this distance right here. Now, if you have the knife in this distance here and you use the knife, then that means that if this person retreats a little bit, say like out to here, now you have plenty of time to draw that firearm so that you could defend yourself against that person. So another way to put it is practice. Practice in your mind. Next time you're at, like going grocery shopping or standing in a checkout line, practice in your head thinking about what would I do if this person was here, if this person was here, if this person was here. What would be my first action? Would it be hand-to-hand combat? Would it be the knife or the gun? So this is why we get down to circle of combat, and this is why I invented the circle of combat, so that we can have an understanding of distance of your circle and your surroundings, of what actions you can take. And I'll give you a small example. Like, for instance, if you're within this distance right here, where you're standing next to somebody that's within 1 yard, these are where the fist and kicks and hand-to-hand combat martial artists are going to be the best to train people is within this distance here. These are the experts that you want to talk to in close quarters, not the knife guys, not yet. Okay. Now, when you're outside of 1 yard, then you want to start talking to Craig Douglas and some other guys that have some close quarters defense moves with knives that are designed, to protect yourself and stuff like that. And I spelled knife wrong, so forgive me for that. But I meant knives or whatever, or cutting utensils, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, once again, Craig Douglas would be within this zone right here. And he has different knives that he developed for close quarters combat. And when we're talking close quarters combat, I'm not talking about 1 yard away. I'm talking about 1 yard to 7 yards, right within this area, where you can have some kind of knife and some kind of defense capabilities to be able to use that knife within these two distances of the circle right here. So the reason why I named Craig Douglas is because of the fact that I looked up some of his videos on his knives, and within further than a yard, I think that we can apply that. But when it's right up close and personal, maybe even somebody like him that does have martial arts hand-to-hand experience, and also other martial artists are going to be specifically experts within this personal space distance, where at a yard you can hit somebody or kick somebody, and the enemy can do the same to you too. So we have to give martial arts guys credit for this first circle right here, because of the fact that you might not be able to reach for that knife, you might not be able to reach for that gun. So one of the problems that's happening is we're confusing all three of these sometimes. And what we have to do is we have to decide which one we're going to pick for what distance, because we can't have a mindset of all three of them, because when seconds matter and the time comes, you have to make a decision. Am I going to go hand to hand? Am I going to grab the knife, or am I going to grab the gun? So you have to be dedicated for that. Now, when it comes down to knives, for instance, I gave you an example of Craig Douglas. Within this combat zone, that's 1 yard out and further. This first zone would be guys that are really good at close quarters combat, Aikido, Kung Fu, martial arts type things and stuff like that. I was trained by a guardian angel. If you guys know anything about guardian angels, street guys and stuff like that. That was my first experience with hand-to-hand combat as far as the martial arts and being trained in some areas of the martial arts for street smarts. So you got the martial arts within this zone, hand-to-hand combat within that 1 yard distance, that personal space. You've got the knife guys, which might have a little bit of martial arts and then some techniques with knives and objects and different things you can use to protect yourself in this zone. And then in this zone and further, this would be guys that run drills with you and stuff like that. If you have an instructor that can teach you the tooler's drill, teach you how to draw more efficiently with your concealed carry firearm, help you find a better holster, help you find a gun, basically just help you find something that you're the fastest with. Not necessarily something small, not necessarily something pretty, but a gun you can get out of your holster the fastest and put accurate shots on the target the fastest. And when I'm talking about 7 yards within 1.5 seconds, I'm talking about the first shot counts. It's got to count, because after the first shot, look at the distance. It's not that far. So you have to make the first shot count. And after the first shot, you must try to retreat as you're shooting and try to get to cover. So if this guy, for instance, if he wasn't armed or was armed, you still need to retreat and get to cover if you can, even if you fired a couple shots. So what I want to talk about here, again, is the fact that You have to decide which one of these you're going to use and have training for each of these circles. And sometimes it's going to be different people. And when you're talking about training for firing that first shot or many shots that you're going to fire within 1.5 seconds at 7 yards, basically just not necessarily 7 yards, but the thing is within 7 to 10 yards, right in this area, you have to make sure that you draw fast enough so that you can make some good shots. And if you look at the kind of targets I use here, anything that's the size of the fist is about the size of the human heart. And what you guys have to understand is that the heart is going to drop the blood pressure faster. And we're not talking about the brain or the spine or other areas right now. This video is just about something that's in center mass when we're talking about the Tooler's drill here. That you're going to go for the heart. You're not going to just go for the chest cavity. You're going to go for the heart is what you want. So you can drop that blood pressure faster. And then, of course, up here you have the larger supporting arteries and stuff like that. So you want to focus on that size of target, which is the size of the heart. So you don't want to be shooting these big 6 to 8 inch plates or big torsos. You want to make sure you set your standards high. You want to make sure you can hit the target first in a 3-shot rapid string. And if you can do it accurately, then pick up the speed. But if you can't do it accurately, slow down. Slow down and hit the target first, and then speed up. So this isn't competition shooting. This is shooting to save your life. So there's a big difference sometimes with competition shooting and defense shooting. They're totally different. The tactics are different. There's a lot of different things you have to understand that's different about competition shooting and tactical shooting and defense shooting. So there's a lot of different concepts and the way people do things. So you have to understand that part for sure. But anyway, hope you liked the video and think about each of these distances and what defense type you're going to use for each of these distances. And like I said, some of you might be able to do something like that at that distance, or maybe even a handgun at that distance. But I'm just trying to be practical here of what most people's situations would be, because we have the research on the Tooler's drill that even though officers knew the martial arts, okay, that they would be able to use it in this distance right here and stuff like that, rather than reaching for their backup gun or their duty gun or whatever, or knife or something, that they have been overcome by guys that didn't have any weapons at all. So that goes to show you, if law enforcement needed to focus on hand-to-hand within 1 yard, then so do we and other people too. So we're just going by what we know based on actual situations that have happened where somebody has been charged by an unarmed person and what happened, what the end results were, where the guy got a hold of the gun, the guy was on the officer, he couldn't reach for his knife, all that kind of stuff. So 1 yard, I would think that we should eliminate that from knives and guns and just stick to hand-to-hand combat, get that distance, and then the officer can clear that distance and grab his knife. And then if he gets even more distance, then he's able to reach his firearm and protect himself. So it's these 3 things that we have to think about and at what distance we're going to use them. So, but anyway, thank you very much for watching, you guys.